A young hotel worker was fired for leaving his post to help Steve Harvey with a technical problem. But the very next day, a phone call would turn his entire world upside down. Marcus had always been taught to help others in need. But when he spotted the famous TV host struggling minutes before a major presentation, that simple decision would cost him his job. Little did he know, his act of kindness hadn't gone unnoticed. What happened next wasn't just unexpected. It was the kind of miracle that changes a person's life forever. It was just another Tuesday morning at the prestigious Grand Plaza Hotel in downtown Chicago. Marcus Johnson, a 23-year-old assistant in the events department, was meticulously running through his mental checklist for the day's high-profile conference. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on his shoulders. He'd been at this job for 3 years now. The pay wasn't great, barely enough to make ends meet. But it was stable employment that helped cover his mother's mounting medical bills after her devastating cancer diagnosis last year. Check microphones, test projector, arrange water bottles, adjust chairs, verify temperature settings. He muttered to himself as he moved with practiced efficiency through the expansive, still empty ballroom. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the pristine white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. Everything needed to be absolutely perfect, down to the last detail. The hotel was hosting a major international business convention, and today's keynote speaker was none other than Steve Harvey, television host, comedian, and business mogul extraordinaire. Marcus had been up since 4:30 a.m., his anxiety about the event keeping him from getting any restful sleep. This was the biggest event the hotel had hosted all year, and Mr. Daniels, his notoriously demanding manager, had made it abundantly clear that any mistakes would not be tolerated. The pressure was suffocating, but Marcus was determined to perform flawlessly. As Marcus finished adjusting the lighting to the exact specifications outlined in the event brief, he noticed a commotion near the stage. There stood Steve Harvey himself, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit, frantically trying to connect his laptop to the projector system. The celebrity's face showed growing frustration as the minutes relentlessly ticked down before his presentation was due to begin. Beads of sweat were forming on his forehead as he fumbled with cables and adapters that clearly weren't cooperating. Where is the tech team? Marcus wondered, scanning the room with increasing concern. The ballroom was beginning to fill with attendees, but no staff member was rushing to assist the keynote speaker. The event coordinator, Ms. Reynolds, was swamped at the registration desk handling a crisis with the guest list. And the IT specialist, who should have been there, had been urgently called away to handle an emergency system crash in another conference room. The timing couldn't have been worse. Marcus felt his stomach knot with indecision. He wasn't supposed to leave his assigned post, not for anything. His manager, Mr. Daniels, had made it crystal clear that morning during their pre-event briefing. Stay at the back entrance, direct attendees to their designated tables, and don't move a single inch unless I explicitly tell you to. His exact words still rang in Marcus's ears. Mr. Daniels ran a notoriously tight ship, with a reputation for firing staff on the spot for the slightest deviation from protocol. Breaking such a direct order would mean serious trouble, possibly even termination. But there was Steve Harvey, looking increasingly desperate as more important executives and industry leaders began filtering into the room, taking their seats and glancing expectantly toward the still dark projection screen. The situation was quickly escalating from problematic to potentially disastrous. Marcus felt his heart pounding against his ribcage, his palms growing damp with sweat. 3 agonizing seconds of deliberation was all it took. In that moment, he thought of what his mother had always taught him. Sometimes doing the right thing means taking a risk. With a deep breath, he quickly walked over to the stage, abandoning his post at the entrance. "Excuse me, Mr. Harvey," Marcus said, his voice somehow steadier than the earthquake he felt inside. "I think I can help with that connection issue you're having. I've worked with this system before." Steve looked up, unmistakable relief washing over his face as he wiped his brow with a monogrammed handkerchief. Thank God someone knows what they're doing. This presentation starts in 10 minutes, and nothing's working. I've got investors worth billions in this room, and I'm about to look like a complete amateur. With skilled hands developed from years of troubleshooting technical issues at the hotel, Marcus quickly identified the problem: an incompatible adapter and incorrect input settings on the sophisticated projection system. He methodically worked through the issue, connecting cables correctly and navigating through the complex settings menu with practiced ease. Within minutes, Steve's presentation was displaying perfectly on the giant screen, the vibrant slides coming to life with crystal clarity. "You're a lifesaver, kid. An absolute lifesaver," Steve said emphatically, clasping Marcus's shoulder with genuine gratitude. "What's your name? I want to make sure your boss knows how valuable you are." "Marcus, sir. Marcus Johnson," he replied, unable to suppress a smile despite his lingering anxiety about abandoning his post. "Well, Marcus Johnson," Steve said, looking him directly in the eyes. "You just saved me from looking like a complete fool in front of 500 of the most influential people in the business world. I appreciate that more than you could possibly know." Not everyone would have stepped up like that. Marcus smiled, feeling a momentary wave of satisfaction wash over him. Perhaps Mr. Daniels would understand once he explained the situation. After all, he had potentially saved the hotel from embarrassment. "Happy to help, Mr. Harvey. That's what I'm here for, making sure everything runs smoothly." As Marcus turned to head back to his abandoned post, hoping the brief absence hadn't been noticed, his heart sank to the pit of his stomach. There, standing rigidly at the ballroom entrance, was Mr. Daniels. Arms tightly crossed over his chest, face darkened with unmistakable fury, eyes narrowed to slits as they bored directly into Marcus. The manager's jaw was clenched so tightly that a muscle twitched visibly in his cheek. In that chilling moment, Marcus knew he had made a critical mistake in the eyes of his unforgiving boss. The look on Mr. Daniels's face said everything words couldn't. Protocol had been broken, and there would be severe consequences to face. What Marcus didn't know, as he walked back to his position with leaden feet and a growing sense of dread, was that his simple act of kindness would cost him everything he'd worked for. But it would also set in motion a chain of events that would transform his life in ways he could never imagine. The next morning arrived with a sense of foreboding. Marcus had barely slept, replaying yesterday's events over and over in his mind. The memory of Mr. Daniels' thunderous expression haunted him through the night. At precisely 8:30 a.m., Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. "My office. Immediately. Daniels." The walk to the administrative wing of the Grand Plaza Hotel felt like the longest journey of Marcus's life. Each step on the plush carpet seemed to echo his racing heartbeat. Staff members he passed averted their eyes. News traveled fast in the hotel industry, and everyone knew when someone was in trouble. When Marcus arrived at the office door with Richard Daniels, events manager, emblazoned on the nameplate, he took a deep breath and knocked. "Enter," came the cold, clipped response. Mr. Daniels sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, not bothering to look up from the paperwork before him. The office was meticulously organized, with awards and certifications lining the walls, testaments to Daniels' 20-year career in luxury hospitality management. "Sit down, Johnson," he said, still not making eye contact. Marcus lowered himself into the uncomfortable chair across from the desk. The silence stretched painfully as Daniels continued to write something. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he set down his pen and looked up. "Do you know why you're here?" Daniels asked, his voice unnervingly calm. "Yes, sir. It's about yesterday, when I left my post to help Mr. Harvey with the projector," Marcus began. "I know I shouldn't have moved without permission, but—" "Stop!" Daniels cut him off sharply. "There are no buts in this business, Johnson. The protocol exists for a reason. When you abandoned your post, 3 VIP guests arrived with no one to direct them. They wandered around confused for nearly 10 minutes. Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Sir, I didn't realize—" "Of course you didn't realize," Daniels interrupted again, his voice rising slightly. "Because you were too busy playing hero instead of doing the job you were assigned. Mr. Daniels, I was just trying to help. Steve Harvey needed assistance, and no one else was available," Marcus explained desperately. His presentation was about to start, and the tech team was. "I don't care if it was the President of the United States." Daniels slammed his hand on the desk, causing Marcus to flinch. "Your job was to stay at that entrance. Period. If you noticed a problem, the protocol is to radio for assistance, not abandon your post." Marcus felt a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. "Sir, I understand. But surely you can see I was trying to do what was best for the hotel. If Mr. Harvey's presentation had failed, it would have reflected poorly on—" "What reflects poorly on this hotel is staff who think they can ignore direct instructions," Daniels cut in, his face reddening. "This isn't the first time you've shown a disregard for procedure, Johnson. Last month you gave that guest a complimentary upgrade without authorization, and in February you extended the breakfast service for that family who arrived late." Marcus was stunned. Those had been acts of kindness that guests had specifically thanked him for. He'd even received commendation cards for both incidents. "But sir, those guests were extremely grateful. The family with the delayed flight even wrote a positive review mentioning our flexibility." "That's not the point." Daniels was nearly shouting now. "The point is that you consistently think you know better than established protocol. That makes you unpredictable, and unpredictable employees are dangerous in this business." He pulled a folder from his desk drawer and slid a document across to Marcus. "The Grand Plaza Hotel is terminating your employment, effective immediately." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You're firing me? Over this?" "I'm firing you over a pattern of insubordination that culminated in yesterday's incident," Daniels replied coldly. "Your final paycheck will be processed today, including any accrued vacation time. You'll need to return your uniform and key card to HR before leaving the premises." Marcus felt the room spinning around him. This job was everything: his stability, his income, his mother's medical coverage. "Mr. Daniels, please," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "My mother's treatments. I need this job. I've been here for 3 years with an otherwise perfect record." For a brief moment, something like sympathy flickered across Daniels' face, but it quickly hardened again. "You should have thought about that before you decided to play by your own rules. Actions have consequences, Johnson. Can I at least explain to you what happened with Steve Harvey? He personally thanked me for saving his presentation. He even said he was going to tell management how helpful I was." Marcus pleaded, clutching at this last hope. Daniels leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Harvey checked out last night. Whatever he may have said in the moment is irrelevant now. The decision has been made. He gestured to the termination papers. "Sign at the bottom, please." With trembling hands, Marcus signed the document. Each stroke of the pen felt like he was signing away his future, his security, his mother's well-being. As he stood to leave, reality crashing down around him, Daniels added, "I'll be noting the reason for termination in your employment record. For your own sake, I suggest being more mindful of following instructions in your next position, wherever that may be." Marcus walked out of the office in a daze, clutching the copy of his termination papers. The hotel hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before him as colleagues watched him make the shameful walk to HR to turn in his badge and uniform. By noon, Marcus found himself standing on the sidewalk outside the Grand Plaza Hotel, a small box containing his personal effects in his arms. 3 years of dedicated service ended in a single morning. As he waited for the bus that would take him back to his apartment, Marcus's mind raced with terrifying calculations. Rent was due in 2 weeks. His mother's next round of treatments started next month. His savings would barely cover a few weeks of expenses. With bills piling up and his mother's medical expenses to pay, Marcus thought his life was over. But the universe had other plans. The next morning, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table, surrounded by job listings and bills. His one-bedroom apartment, usually a haven of comfort, now felt like it was closing in on him. The walls seemed to echo with the ticking clock of financial disaster. "We'll figure this out," he told his mother over the phone, forcing optimism into his voice. "I've got some promising leads already." It was a lie, but he couldn't bear to worry her. Not when she was fighting her own battle against stage 3 lymphoma. "I know you will, honey," his mother replied, her voice weak but determined. "You always land on your feet. Remember what your father used to say. God doesn't close a door without opening a window." Marcus finished, smiling despite himself. His father had been gone for 5 years now, but his wisdom lingered. After hanging up, Marcus returned to scanning job listings. Nothing matched his qualifications or paid enough to cover the medical bills. The severance check from the Grand Plaza would barely last 2 weeks. At precisely 10:17 a.m., his phone rang. An unknown number with a Los Angeles area code. Probably another spam call, but Marcus was in no position to ignore potential opportunities. "Hello, Marcus Johnson speaking," he answered professionally. "Marcus, my man," boomed an instantly recognizable voice. "It's Steve Harvey." Marcus nearly dropped the phone. "Mr. Harvey, how did you get my number?" A rich laugh came through the speaker. "When you're on TV, you can get just about anything if you ask nicely. Listen, I heard what happened at the hotel. That's some cold business, firing you for helping me out." Marcus sank into his chair. "News travels fast, I guess." "Faster than you think. I asked for you yesterday evening, wanted to give you a proper thank you, and they told me you no longer worked there. Got the whole story from one of the bellhops who saw what went down." "It's been a difficult day," Marcus admitted. "Well, that's exactly why I'm calling," Steve continued. "What you did, stepping up when nobody else would. That's the kind of initiative I look for in people. Shows character, shows integrity." Marcus felt a small spark of hope. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." "Don't thank me yet," Steve said. "I've got a proposition for you. I need someone on my team who can think on their feet. Someone who puts solving problems ahead of protocol when it matters. Someone exactly like you." The spark grew brighter. "What kind of position are we talking about?" "I need a new personal assistant. Someone who can travel with me, handle technical setups for presentations, coordinate with venues, Basically, make sure nothing falls through the cracks. The job pays $85,000 a year, full benefits, and you'd be working directly with me. Marcus nearly fell out of his chair. That was more than triple his hotel salary. Mr. Harvey, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Steve replied simply. Sometimes life knocks you down just to see if you're tough enough to get back up. You got knocked down yesterday, but I'm offering you a hand up today. What do you say? Marcus thought about his mother's medical bills, about the dead-end job search, about Mr. Daniels' cold dismissal. Then he thought about this incredible opportunity that had appeared out of nowhere. Yes, Marcus said firmly. Absolutely yes. That's what I wanted to hear, Steve exclaimed. My team will email you the details within the hour. We're filming in Chicago next week, so I'll need you to start then. And Marcus? Yes, Mr. Harvey? Sometimes getting fired is the best thing that can happen to a man. Forces him to find where he really belongs. I got fired from plenty of jobs before I found my path. This might just be the beginning of yours. After hanging up, Marcus sat in stunned silence. Yesterday, he'd lost everything. Today, his entire future had changed with a single phone call. He looked at the stack of bills on his table and for the first time since being fired, felt tears welling in his eyes. Not tears of despair, but of overwhelming relief and gratitude. His phone pinged with an incoming email. The subject line read, "Welcome to the Steve Harvey team. Employment details enclosed." Marcus took a deep breath and opened it, ready to begin the next chapter of his life. One that would take him further than he ever imagined possible. 1 week later, Marcus stood in the bustling lobby of the Chicago Media Center, dressed in a new charcoal suit that still had the faint smell of the department store. His polished shoes reflected the overhead lights, and his freshly trimmed haircut gave him a professional edge he hadn't felt in years. The security badge clipped to his lapel read, "Staff, Harvey Productions." The transformation had been whirlwind. Within days of that life-changing phone call, he'd received a signing bonus that covered his mother's medical bills for the next 3 months. A comprehensive health insurance package that would provide better coverage for her treatments, and a detailed contract outlining his new responsibilities. Mr. Johnson. A woman with a clipboard and a headset approached him. I'm Diane, head of Mr. Harvey's production team. We've been expecting you. She led Marcus through a maze of hallways, past sound stages and production rooms where teams of people worked with focused intensity. Mr. Harvey speaks very highly of you, Diane said as they walked. That's unusual. He doesn't typically bring people onto his personal team so quickly. I'm still trying to process it all myself, Marcus admitted. A week ago, I was an unemployed hotel worker. Diane stopped at a door marked Executive Suite and smiled. Well, today you're starting a whole new chapter. Ready? Before Marcus could answer, the door swung open, revealing a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Steve Harvey stood by a large conference table, surrounded by several people in deep discussion. When he spotted Marcus, his face lit up with that famous smile. There he is, Steve exclaimed, breaking away from the group. Everyone, this is Marcus Johnson, the newest member of our team. He clapped Marcus on the shoulder and addressed the room. This young man saved my presentation last week when nobody else would step up. Got fired for it too, can you believe that? Their loss is our gain. The team members nodded politely, but Marcus could read the skepticism in some of their eyes. He was an outsider, unproven, brought in through an unusual circumstance. Don't worry about them, Steve said quietly as he guided Marcus to a private office adjacent to the main room. They'll warm up once they see what you can do. The office was modest, but well appointed, with a desk, computer setup, and a window with a view of the city. "This is yours," Steve said. "First day's always about getting your bearings, setting up accounts, meeting the team. Diane will help you with all that. But tomorrow, we hit the ground running." "I'll be ready," Marcus promised. Steve studied him for a moment. "You know, when I heard what happened to you at that hotel, it reminded me of something that happened to me years ago. I was working at a factory, saw a problem nobody was fixing, stepped in to help, and got fired for leaving my station. Best thing that ever happened to me." "How so?" Marcus asked. "Forced me to take a chance on myself. Sometimes we get too comfortable, even in situations that aren't right for us. Getting pushed out makes us find where we really belong." Steve checked his watch. "I've got to run to a meeting, but we'll talk more later. Big things ahead, Marcus. Big things." After Steve left, Marcus sat at his new desk, taking in the reality of his situation. A week ago, he'd been devastated, seeing only closed doors. Now, he was sitting in an office with his name on the door, working for one of the most successful entertainers in the business. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "How's the first day going, honey?" Marcus smiled as he typed his reply. "Better than I could have imagined. I'll call you tonight with all the details." As he set down his phone, Diane appeared at his door with a stack of paperwork and a company laptop. "Ready to get started?" she asked. Marcus nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "More than ready." "Good," she said, setting down the materials. "Because your first real test comes tomorrow. Mr. Harvey has a major presentation for potential investors in his new education initiative. He specifically requested that you handle the technical setup and coordination." "Already? I haven't even been trained on your systems yet." Diane gave him a knowing look. "Mr. Harvey said, and I quote, 'He'll figure it out. That's why I hired him.' The team is a bit concerned, to be honest. This presentation is worth potentially millions in funding." The pressure was immediate and intense, but instead of anxiety, Marcus felt a strange sense of calm. This was exactly the kind of challenge he thrived on. "I won't let him down," Marcus said with quiet confidence. "I hope not," Diane replied. "Because while Mr. Harvey gave you this chance, it's what you do with it that matters. Not everyone here is convinced you belong yet." After she left, Marcus turned to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city that had witnessed his lowest moment a week ago would now see his rise. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. He could sense the skepticism from the team, feel the weight of expectations. But for the first time in years, he was exactly where he needed to be. He opened the laptop and began familiarizing himself with the systems, determined to prove that Steve Harvey's faith in him was well placed. Tomorrow would be his real first test, and Marcus Johnson intended to pass it with flying colors. What he didn't know was that the investor presentation would bring an unexpected face from his past back into his life. Someone who would complicate everything. The next morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Marcus had stayed late into the night, meticulously preparing for the investor presentation. He'd familiarized himself with Steve's slideshow, tested the audiovisual equipment multiple times, and even prepared backup plans for various technical scenarios that might arise. Nothing would be left to chance. He arrived at the conference center 2 hours early, dressed impeccably in his new suit. The venue was the prestigious Lakeside Financial Center, known for hosting high-profile business events. As Marcus walked through the gleaming marble lobby, he couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically his circumstances had changed in just over a week. "Morning, Marcus," Steve greeted him, already at the presentation hall reviewing his notes. "You ready for this?" "Everything's set up and tested, sir," Marcus replied confidently. "I've got backup files on 3 different devices, spare adapters for any connection type, and I've already coordinated with the venue's tech team." Steve nodded approvingly. "This is why I brought you on. Attention to detail. Most people wait to be told what to do. You anticipate problems before they happen." The team began filtering in. Diane with her ever-present clipboard, marketing executives, content developers, and various assistants. Marcus noticed the sidelong glances, the whispered conversations. He was still the outsider, the unknown quantity who had somehow gained the boss's favor overnight. "Don't mind them," Steve said quietly, noticing Marcus's awareness of the team's skepticism. "Results speak louder than rumors. After today, they'll understand." By 9:30 a.m., the presentation hall was prepared to perfection. The projector displayed a crisp, vibrant welcome slide. Water pitchers and glasses were arranged on elegant side tables, and informational packets sat at each seat. The investors would arrive at 10:00 a.m. "Marcus," Diane called from the entrance, "the first guests are arriving early. Can you help greet them while I finish the seating arrangements?" "Of course," he replied, straightening his tie and moving toward the door. The first few investors were exactly what Marcus expected. Serious-looking men and women in expensive suits, carrying leather portfolios and exuding an air of cautious interest. He greeted each one professionally, directing them to the refreshment table while the formal proceedings prepared to begin. Then the next guest walked through the door, and Marcus felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath him. Richard Daniels, his former boss, the man who had fired him just 9 days ago, stood in the doorway, looking equally shocked to see Marcus. "Johnson," Daniels said, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What are you doing here?" Marcus recovered quickly, extending his hand with professional courtesy that masked his inner turmoil. "Good morning, Mr. Daniels. I'm with Mr. Harvey's team now. May I show you to the refreshment table before we begin?" Daniels reluctantly shook his hand, clearly struggling to process this unexpected development. "You're working for Steve Harvey? Since when?" "Since shortly after my departure from the Grand Plaza," Marcus replied evenly, careful to keep his tone neutral despite the satisfaction he felt at Daniels' obvious discomfort. Before Daniels could respond, Steve Harvey himself approached, clapping a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Marcus, everything looking good?" Steve asked, then noticed Daniels. "Ah, you must be from the Hospitality Investment Group. Richard Daniels, right? I believe we met briefly at the conference last week." "Yes, that's correct," Daniels replied, his eyes darting between Steve and Marcus. "I wasn't aware that Marcus had joined your organization." Steve's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes took on a knowing gleam. "Best decision I've made this quarter. Found him solving problems when others were standing around. That's the kind of initiative you can't teach." He turned to Marcus. "Would you mind checking on the presentation one more time? I want everything perfect when we start." "Right away, sir," Marcus replied, grateful for the momentary escape from this uncomfortable reunion. As he walked away, he could hear Steve continuing. "You know, I was surprised to hear the Grand Plaza let him go. In my experience, it's rare to find someone so quick-thinking." At the podium, Marcus busied himself with final checks of the presentation system, but his mind was racing. Of all the potential investors, Richard Daniels had to be among them. The man who had fired him, who had shown no mercy despite 3 years of dedicated service, was now sitting in the audience about to hear a pitch from his new employer. The irony was almost too perfect. When the presentation began, Marcus stood at the back of the room, controlling the slides with practiced precision. Steve was masterful, outlining his vision for an educational initiative that would bring financial literacy and entrepreneurship training to underserved communities. The investors were clearly engaged, taking notes and nodding with interest. Throughout it all, Marcus could feel Daniels watching him during breaks in his attention to the presentation. The man's expression had transformed from shock to something more complex, perhaps a mixture of regret and calculation. When the Q&A session began, Daniels raised his hand. "Mr. Harvey, this initiative sounds promising. But what guarantees do we have about the quality of implementation? Ideas are wonderful, but execution is everything." Steve smiled. "Excellent question. In fact, that's exactly why people like Marcus are crucial to my team. Let me share a story about how he handled a crisis situation just last week." To Marcus's surprise, Steve recounted the projector incident in detail, using it as a case study in problem-solving and initiative. Exactly the qualities needed for the education program's success. As Steve spoke, Daniel's face grew increasingly uncomfortable. By the end of the story, several investors were looking at Daniels with raised eyebrows, clearly aware of the connection. When the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, the investors gathered around Steve, eager to continue the conversation. Marcus remained professional, distributing additional materials and answering questions when approached. Eventually, Daniels made his way to Marcus, his expression unreadable. "Quite a turn of events," he said quietly. Marcus nodded. "Life takes unexpected directions sometimes." "Indeed." Daniels hesitated, then continued reluctantly. "The hotel board was displeased when they learned the details of your termination, particularly after Mr. Harvey mentioned the incident positively in several interviews." "I'm sorry to hear that," Marcus replied, though he wasn't sorry at all. "Yes, well..." Daniels cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I may have been hasty in my decision." Before Marcus could respond, Steve called him over to meet some of the other investors. With a polite nod to Daniels, he walked away, feeling a weight lifting from his shoulders. The man who had once held such power over his life now seemed diminished. Just another person in a room full of potential connections. Later, as the event wound down and the team began packing up, Steve approached Marcus. "Saw you talking with your old boss," he said. "Small world, huh?" "Smaller than I ever imagined," Marcus admitted. "He said the hotel board wasn't happy about my termination." Steve laughed. "I might have mentioned your situation in a few interviews. Amazing how quickly attitudes change when publicity gets involved." "Thank you for that," Marcus said sincerely, "and for sharing my story during your presentation." "Wasn't just for you," Steve replied. "It was the perfect example of what I look for in people who work on my projects." Speaking of which, the investors were impressed, especially with how smoothly everything ran today. "You've earned some respect from the team." As if on cue, Diane approached with a rare smile. "The Brookfield Foundation wants to meet again next week. They're very interested. And Marcus, excellent work today." After she walked away, Steve gave Marcus a knowing look. "See? Results speak louder than rumors. Now, let's get packed up. We've got a dinner with the primary investors tonight, and tomorrow we start planning phase 1 of this project." As Marcus gathered his equipment, he caught sight of Daniels leaving the venue, shoulders slightly slumped. 9 days ago, that man had represented the end of Marcus's hopes. Now, he was merely a footnote in a much larger story that was just beginning to unfold. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, a door needs to slam shut before you find the courage to walk through a better one.